Ugh.
I'm just walking along singing. I am Homer Simpson.
Simpson, huh?
Yeah, I feel dizzy. Oh, I'm so dizzy.
Look at me! I'm a birdie!
So this incredible movie that you just saw was made using the Simpsons cartoon studio. You know, they stopped making Simpsons games entirely a pretty long time ago at this point, but back when the show wasn't completely unbearable, we actually got a lot of them, and some have become pretty iconic. Obviously there's the awesome Simpsons Hit and Run.
I am evil Homer. I am evil Homer.
Another pretty big one is the Simpsons arcade game, which famously still depicts Marge's scrapped bunny ears. And there are a bunch of other Simpsons games that have stood the test of time in one way or another. But the Simpsons cartoon studio is definitely one of the more obscure ones. I mean, to be fair, you could argue it's more of a baby's first animation software than a real video game. But I'd say if Virtual Springfield counts, then so does this one.
Mr. Burns!
But yeah, it's basically an animation tool using Simpsons assets. I remember playing it back when I was a kid, way before I came into contact with Flash or any other real animation software, and I even managed to dig up some old cartoons that I'd made back then, which I actually thought were all lost at this point. But more on that later. For now, let's appreciate those 1996 thumbnails. The main thumbnail for the game actually looks nice, but what is going on with that player? Why does it look so bad? Back inside the game, I really like how much personality they crammed into the UI. On the right hand side you have all these posters which serve as your access point to all of the assets that you can use for your cartoons. This includes character animations, backgrounds, props, and audio. Regarding the animations, you have quite a lot to choose from for Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie. And then a few other characters actually also get a decent selection, but the remaining ones are clustered together with a somewhat random selection of animations for each of them. For example, Chief Wiggum only has this one animation of him eating donuts and that's it. While Smithers doesn't even have any of his own animations and actually only exists as part of some of Mr. Burns' animations. However, there are of course ways of hiding Mr. Burns if you don't want him there. This game has a lot of limitations like this, and I think that's actually a huge part of its charm. It's one of those cases where you will have to come up with clever solutions based around the limitations of the assets that you do have access to. And you will very likely end up repurposing a lot of them to convey something they weren't even intended for. For example, I remember using the first part of Homer's eating animation a lot to have him push buttons or just generally touch things.
Dios no me ama!
Having said that, especially when it comes to the audio side of things, the available assets are somewhat lacking. First off, the audio quality is pretty awful.
Oh, boo-hoo-hoo.
Of course, the game is very old, right? But even so, there are games that came out around the same time with noticeably better audio quality.
Hey, Flux, go stand on that loose floorboard for a second, okay?
Sure, buddy. Whatever you say.
Another issue is that the available background music is just way too loud, with no option to adjust its relative volume, which makes some of the sound clips basically impossible to discern. Apart from that though, you do at least have a good amount of clips to work with, and just as with all the beautiful hand-drawn animations that were created specifically for this game, it's just awesome to hear all these voice clips that the original cast recorded just for it.
Howdy, Marge, my man. I was just jamming.
Oh, oh, that hurts! Oh!
Look what I found in my hair!
No, the really frustrating restrictions center around how the game just generally handles bringing your animation to life, especially coming off of real animation software. Let's start off with this vertical bar here on the left, which controls the layering of all the characters and props. You might already be able to see the issue with it. This order is adhered to throughout the entire animation, meaning if you want Homer to be in front of Bart for one scene, then, well, Homer is in front of Bart for every scene now. That's obviously not ideal, but since the maximum length of an animation tops out at around 1 minute and 40 seconds anyway, and you can move characters around in such a way to not have them overlap, it's not the worst thing in the world. What is the worst thing in the world, though, is every aspect of how this game handles the goddamn timeline. With the exception of this adorable Krusty on a unicycle, of course. But otherwise, this thing is going to be the source of most of your suffering. Now, this is what a typical timeline looks like in animation software. So when comparing the two, you may notice a small issue with Simpsons Cartoon Studios' timeline. In that it doesn't show you a single thing except for the frame that you're currently on. Now, naturally, some questions may come to mind because of this, and for anyone who's used animation software before, or even video editing software, a lot of questions may come to mind. So let me address them individually.
Question number 1. How do I fucking
You don't because you can't. Whatever it is you're wondering about, it probably just doesn't work. You basically can't go back and adjust animations from previous frames without very likely overriding way more than you wanted to, which most of the time results in you having to redo all the animations from that point on. Generally, you can't move anything to a different frame. Like, even if you just wanted to move everything in the entire animation 200 frames ahead because you thought of a new opening scene, you cannot do that. You have to redo the entire animation if you want to do that. You can't have multiple audio clips playing at the same time. You can have audio clips interrupt each other, but you cannot just cut them off early if they're not being interrupted by something else. Why? And even outside of the timeline, there are some pretty nasty shortcomings. I just mentioned how it's close to impossible to make adjustments to previous scenes. Well, if you wanna try your luck anyway, you better save your animation, because other than loading a previous save, there is no way to undo any changes. There is also no way to do a clean motion tween where you just pick a starting position and an end position and then have your character move there. Instead, you have to either drag the character across the scene, which usually looks pretty terrible, or alternatively, and I didn't know about this when I was a kid, but by holding down the shift key, you can move each individual frame of their animation into place. Which looks good, but is incredibly cumbersome, especially since there's no option to enable onion skinning for this process. So yeah, when compared to real animation software, even animation software of that time period by the way, the lack of functionality is pretty rough. But I think this level of capability probably wasn't even on their minds when making this game, and they just wanted to make something that is easily accessible first and foremost. I mean, honestly, even the preloaded cartoons look pretty rough. So especially for kids who might be overwhelmed with real animation software or discouraged about having to come up with their own art from the ground up for every aspect of the animation, I actually think this game serves as a pretty cool and accessible jumping in point. I definitely thought so when I was little, which is why I made a whole bunch of animations back then, even if only a few of them have survived. So, as I mentioned earlier, I only now rediscovered those. Honestly, most of them aren't really interesting enough to showcase, but there are a few really fun ones which I might upload separately. But for now, I just want to focus on this one animation that I did back then. I'm pretty sure this was the last animation I ever made using Cartoon Studio, and as you can see, the title is just a sad face. And since this was ages ago, I don't actually remember why I named it that, but I do have a theory. So this animation is super short and underwhelming. It's basically just Bart getting eaten by a shark and then Lisa running away screaming. But here's the thing. Games from around that era often had an issue where certain aspects of the game were tied directly to your CPU speed. In a lot of cases, it was just an animation here or there and it wasn't a huge deal. But in this game, the act of placing animations was tied directly to the CPU speed. That means that as time went on and we kept upgrading our PC, the game became more and more difficult to control. For example, when trying to drag a walking animation across the scene, I remember doing this over and over and over again. Until I miraculously got it looking somewhat passable. Clearly I didn't know that I could hold down shift to place frames individually back then, because otherwise I definitely would have done that. So what I think happened was that while I was working on this animation, we upgraded our PC one more time, and this time the game started running at such fast speeds that placing animations became completely impossible to do.
Now you're totally stuck in the retro zone. Sad face.
I just wish I could go back in time to my kid self and be like, hey look, if you hold down the shift key, you can actually place frames individually. It's a bit clunky, but it looks a lot better than trying to... Shut up! God. Oh, also, using Control and Alt, you can cycle through the frames of a selected animation, so you don't have to start each animation from the first frame. That's really useful, especially for walking animations, because... Calm down! Jesus!